Now, let's look by contrast, because you got to make a choice here. Let's look at, by contrast, what the alternative is. Keep in mind, when you elected me in 1992, the United States debt had quadrupled in the previous 12 years. We quadrupled the debt from $1 to $4 trillion in 12 years. On trickle-down economics. The idea that you just cut taxes on people in my income group, I love saying this, I never had any money when I got out of the way. Oh, wonderful things would occur. Yeah, wonderful things occurred. Middle-class people got squeezed. And the same thing happened later, but the cost of health care went up, the cost of college went up, wages didn't go up, and the deficit exploded, we quadrupled the debt. So you put me in there, and in my second 4 years, average family income reached an all-time high in real dollars. We had the first 4 years since the early 70s when the bottom 20% of working families increased their incomes in percentage terms more than the top 20%. It hadn't happened before, and it hadn't happened since. And we had 23 million new jobs, record new small businesses, and everybody participated. We had a record number of millionaires and billionaires too. It's just that they had to get on there with the rest of us. Everybody went up together. And that's what, look, one of the great things about this country is we don't resent other people's success. We just want a fair deal. So I tried to give you a fair deal. This what happened. Then President Bush came in with a Republican Congress, and they gave us what we had in the 12 years before I took office on steroids. Because they did whatever they wanted. And unbelievably enough, after all this evidence, right, we had 50% more jobs in my 8 years than in the previous 12 years. And everybody benefited, and we were running surpluses, and we were on track to get this country completely out of debt 4 or 5 years from now. Then what did they do? They went back to right what they were doing. So unbelievably, in a period where we were having some economic growth, they doubled the debt of the country again. When they had total control of the government. And what did you get for it? Now remember this, before the financial meltdown. Think back to this, September 15, 2008, when the government, the Bush administration decided not to throw a lifeline to Lehman Brothers, and this whole collapse occurred. It's the only time in my lifetime, by the way, a presidential election didn't happen on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. The election was September 15, 2008. It was over after that. But before that, 2/3 of the American people had after-inflation incomes that were lower than they were the day I left office. Before that, health care costs had doubled, college costs up 75%. We only had 2.5 million new jobs, less than 10% of the number produced in our 8 years. Why? Because their economic theory doesn't work. What creates jobs is when small business people feel like they can go to the bank, get a loan at a reasonable interest rate, expand their businesses, hire people, when you're starting new businesses, when you're doing new things, when the economy's working. They weren't doing any of that. So we were in trouble before. And then we got in this big deep hole, we lost 8 million jobs. Now, I like saying this because it's no secret that I tried hard to beat President Obama. A lot of you helped. I did everything I could to beat him. So I can tell you this. He has done a much better job than he is getting credit for, and I think the Democrats are economic stimulus helped. The financial reform package will keep a lot of this stuff from happening again. One of the reasons none of this happened when we were having all this hot growth when I was president is that I had a man named Arthur Levitt at the Securities Exchange Commission who believed he was supposed to do his job and regulate the trading of securities and keep the gambling, the reckless gambling of money in securities at a minimum. We have known now for 100 years that capitalism has a tendency to self-destruct at the edges once you get so much greed growth going, people get greedy. This is not a new lesson. We just failed to learn a very old lesson. So he passed this financial reform. The health care bill is not perfect, but I would have voted for it because you are never going to get a hold of this until you cover everybody. You're never going to get a hold of the cost. You're never going to get a hold of quality. And so when these guys talking about repealing, and I just want to give you this is all you need to know. Let's just talk about the economics of health care. Never mind the humanitarian aspect. Here's the one thing you need to know. We are spending 17.2% of our income on health care every year. $2.5 trillion. Now we're in this global economy, you know, but forget about the poor countries. The rich countries we're competing with for high-tech jobs in the future and all that. Of all the countries of any size, the most expensive system besides ours is Canada. That's 10.5% of their income. The next most expensive, which are always related to the best in the world, are Germany and France. They're 10% of income. Everybody else is between 9 and 10.5% of income. Every other rich country in the world. And they insured everybody. We insured 84% and spent 17%. That means at the beginning of every year, every country in the world competing with us for the future knows that we're going to fork over $1 trillion more than they are for health care. So we like throw away $1 trillion at the beginning of every year. It doesn't make us healthy. So if you want this economy to recover over the long run, and you want your children and grandchildren to grow up in an America that's stronger than you, we've got to have a decent health care system that not only covers everybody, but it's competitive in cost. Otherwise, we're in trouble. And that's why I worked so hard on this. Now, he passed it for one reason. You gave him a good Congress in 2006 and 2008. So we had 60 votes, and he could break the Republican filibuster. I only had 55 votes, and we couldn't do it. I actually got a couple of Republicans to support our health care efforts, but not enough to overcome the filibuster. That's all there is to it. So he did that. Then he passed a bill that will dramatically cut the cost of financing a college education and allow every college graduate from now on to pay back that loan as a percentage of their income, so nobody can ever be bankrupt by borrowing the money to go to college. Now, we did that on a voluntary basis when I was president. It's all I could pass. But students save $9 billion in loan repayment costs, and guess what? The taxpayers save $4 billion because young people pay their loans back when they can afford to do it. We didn't have to speak of any defaults, and that's what's going to happen this time. So the only point I'm trying to make is, the guy told us what he was going to do when he was running against Senator McCain, and he's done his best to do it. And I've been there, and I know how hard it is, and I told him 50 times not to feel bad about this. When you're a Democrat, they hire you to fix problems, and when people don't feel better, they can't give you credit. But I'm just telling you, I've been there. He's doing a better job than he gets credit for, and we don't need to apologize. We need to go out and be aggressive and say, give us 2 more years. Give us a chance to make this work. If it doesn't, you can throw us all out. But for goodness sakes, don't put the people in there that cause this problem. Not because they cause the problem. I don't care about blaming, but because they have the same ideas. And we've now tried it twice. We tried it for the 12 years before I became president, and we tried it for the 8 years after. It doesn't work as well as investing in the future. And the reason I think Pennsylvania ought to send Joe Sestak to the Senate. The fact that he's a Democrat and shares my values is actually secondary. I think one big reason is he made it all the way to the top of the Navy because he was a problem solver. And he could analyze where the opportunities were and do something about them. I'll just give you one example. We had a long talk today on the phone, like I said, I was coming over here. All he could talk about, he said, I'm telling you, We've got to do more in the Congress for small business. We've got to do. That's where all the jobs are created. Well, guess what? Even when I was president, and we were creating all those jobs, the Fortune 500 companies reduced employment. Not because they were trying to hurt America, they like being here, but because they can afford the latest equipment, they can afford the latest technology, they can always do more with fewer people. The jobs were created by people like the people standing in this room in communities like Scranton, Pennsylvania.